So this video is documenting partially the rebuild of my Comptometer Model H series. This is a 12 column unit. As you can see, the serial number is 204268. At some point it seems like this was refinished with a gray textured finish. I'm not sure if that was factory or if that was a repair shop or a factory repair that did it. But it's quite old and it's quite interesting. Where it's chipped away, you can see the copper finish underneath. When this unit was shipped to me, when it was put in its box, it was in working order. However, it was not packaged correctly, and in the process of being shipped to me, it received rather considerable damage. Many key tops are broken. Some keys, as you see here, were bent. The unit no longer functions correctly. It will clear, but a number of things don't enter correctly, and some keys simply don't depress. So this now requires a complete overhaul in order to get it functional again. And I have, where possible, attempted to epoxy some keys back together where there were sufficient fragments to be able to do that. These are the easy ones. They were just split in half. Now, I don't necessarily expect the epoxy to hold up over time, but it's better than not having key tops. And I realize that some people will kind of object to this. But, you know, it's better to have the original materials than it is to have a substitute that doesn't look quite right, or a key from another machine that's a different color. And this is especially true on the black key that broke. That one will go up here. This one just simply split in two. You can't tell the difference. So it's as good as it's going to get. Anyway, so I've already done the preliminary. I've removed the lever. I have removed the screws from this plate. It simply pulls off. And as with anything, you should always keep the parts, in this case the screws, with whatever it is you're taking apart. The next step is to lift this out of the internal case. After having removed the 4 screws from the underside. Now this one doesn't have feet, a lot of them don't, so it was just those. Now I'm going to do this, and I have to have the camera in my hand in order to, so you'll pardon me for not being able to actually show you this. Okay, so there is the undercase, and as you can see, there are screws holding the sides of the case onto the bottom. So if you simply take these screws out, you are not going to be able to lift this off because it's still held in to the bottom frame by this. So now, here's the machine with its side removed. You can see the workings here. You can see this isn't actually in that bad a condition. I have not attempted to do any sort of cleaning on this yet. It looks in pretty good shape. Not a whole lot of dirt in it. And I don't initially see anything that's terribly out of place. Now, when you tip this machine up, the underside looks like that. It looks pretty complicated, but the thing to realize about a machine like this is that what you have here is not a wildly complex machine. What you have is a machine that is one row and one dial replicated 10 times. The only difference is the carry mechanism linking these wheels together and the error control system here. Otherwise, it's as simple as it can get. This can literally be a one-row machine and still function. So with that, I'm going to go to the next steps in disassembly, and I will resume this video then. See you in a moment. Okay, so before I go on any further, one of the things I wanted to do is kind of point out one aspect of this case. You notice that it has cork in here. Now, over time, all this is pretty dried and pretty hard, but this cork serves two purposes. Number one, it helps absorb sound, which is important when you're dealing with a mechanical machine. That can get kind of annoying. But just as importantly, it absorbs excess oil that might drip down off of the machine. Now you can see here, and this is present on all the units, there are a series of oil holes, sometimes more, sometimes less. You can see them there below the keys. They changed in every unit, and that's one of the ways you can tell what kind of unit you've got, just by looking for the various points at which you're able to do oiling. Now, if you overdid it, there would be some that would drip down into the bottom of the case. Sometimes, if you let it sit long enough, it would dry and it would be no problem. But otherwise, if you moved it around or if it were in the wrong spot, you would end up with oil on your desk, and you certainly don't want that. So the cork helps to absorb that and give it a chance to dry out rather than run outside the case. The only downside of that is that oil collects dirt. And that's one of the reasons you shouldn't over-oil your machine, because all you're doing is putting dirt into the workings of the mechanism. Now, as I pointed out here, this one isn't too bad. It doesn't really have a whole lot in terms of dirt and dust and everything gathered inside it. Some of these, you open this up and you see that this area is just, there's nothing but fuzz in here, and it's very disgusting, and the first thing you need to do is take a air compressor to it and blow all that stuff out. It's probably not going to vacuum out well. Okay, so the first order of business, there is a pin that you can see right here that holds all the number wheels in place. Now, most of these you need to pull out from the left-hand side. This one you can pull out from the right. And as I do, you will see that all the number wheels will begin to drop. And that's that. Now, one thing that I want to do here, and forgive me for just a moment because it's not where it's supposed to be, is I have a bit of tape and a marker, because I want to make sure that I put every part in exactly the same place it came out from. So I'm putting the flag on this end, and this is the counter wheel pin. And I'm explicitly going to label this as the right-hand side. And I'm going to set it aside. Now, the next bit is to take a set of bags and then take each of the wheels, this row being 1, and that being 15, or 12 in this case, and then put each wheel in a separate bag arranged by column. These are a little bit interesting to get out. You can see the wheel isn't solid, it's just a piece of stamped metal with numbers on it and a little gear attached, so nice and simple. Now, manufacturing yesterday, back when this was done, isn't what it is today. So tolerances were a lot less. Therefore, certain parts were chosen based on their fit with the adjoining parts. So they're not necessarily entirely identical. So it's important to keep everything in column order. That's where the bags come in. So anything you take out of column 1, you put in bag 1. Anything you take out of column 2, you put in bag 2. So the next step in this is a little clip right here, kind of hard to see, that will keep you from pulling out this next pin. I can't really get the camera up on it, I've already released it a bit. Once you get that out, you can begin to draw the wire outside. Here you can see the bit that it was going to catch on, but you can't do that without holding the frame forward. So you can grab on this here, then hold up on the supports here, if you can hold it, and then this wire should then come straight out to the side. Now you have to hold this because otherwise the wire won't clear the frame, as you can see. So now that's done. The next step in this disassembly is to remove this pin here. Now there can be some tension on it, so to press a key it'll release it, or you can reach back here and push that backwards if it's not already backwards, and you can see it move if I put the controller on here, that this is moving forward here, pivoting this, and it's kind of hard to see and I can't really get the camera in there, but the pin passes through a slot, and that is what we're trying to release. Now a pin punch helps, but you can improvise in lots of ways. I'm going to need something a little bit smaller than this. Okay. There we go. Just enough to grab it and gently pull it free. Now you'll also note that I've got this supported off the bench here, because at this point things start to hang loose and you need to make sure that you don't damage anything as you proceed. Now, next thing you have to do is deal with the linkages in the rock frame. So I'm going to do that on my own and then get back to you after the next step. Next step in disassembling Comptometer Model H and J, you'll notice that there is a pin right here, just behind the screw and the supporting shaft, that is tied to these intermediate gears here. Now, I started removing these gears before I realized I hadn't started recording this, so forgive the empty spots. But what you want to do is you want to take some suitable object like a 7/64 drill bit or a 2.5 millimeter wire. So the wire is 0.108, but closest you're going to get is about 2.5. You want to follow through so that you get it through these first two links here and support them while you're pulling the wire the rest of the way out. Now, as you remove each gear, stop short, grab it with a pair of pliers or something gently, pull it out, and put it into the appropriate numbered bag. And then when you get to the far end, leave the pin in. Don't pull it quite all the way out, because there's another step you have to do first. Okay, so I'm about to pull the wire through the last gear. Now note carefully, I'm stopping just after the gear. I still have just a little bit of support on the rock frame itself. So I'm going to grab the last gear. Hopefully I've got the wire past it. There we go. And before I do anything else, I want to just take a moment and look at this gear. Notice that every cut that can be made has been in order to lighten the gear. First you have the big cuts here, but then you have the little intermediate cuts right here as well. And it just makes this whole thing such a wonderful thing to look at. It's just such a beautiful pattern. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out. So the next thing you want to do is you want to make sure that everything here is hard up against this. And in this case, it doesn't move that much. Okay, now you need to get something to support the rock frame itself so that it doesn't fall down as you remove the pins. Before you do that, you also need to take these little things here. I'm not 100% certain what purpose they serve, but there are 3 of them, that you need to pull down away from the frame. Okay, so I improvised with a pair of construction pencils since I don't really have all the proper tools for this, so I'm not exactly a mechanic shop. So now that you've got it supported properly, you can pull out the temporary supports and the pin. And I'm going to set it down in my parts bin, which is actually the bottom of the unit. Makes it very convenient. Now, I have never done this before, but you're supposed to be able to pivot this up, and rotate it forward, and should be able to gently remove it. But I understand it's a little bit tricky to do until you've done it a few times, and then you know the secret. Well, I'm going to fiddle with this for a bit without making you watch. Okay, so we've got the rock frame out now. And what you do is you lift this up, and you should be able to get it to wiggle it a bit, push it a bit to the right, and then it'll come straight out. Now, the rock frame contains the bits for the carry and things related with that. So this spring here, this is what drives the carry and clear. So what happens is, as you rotate the number wheel, or as you add, the spring picks up tension. And when you release the clearing bar, what happens there is that it disengages the rock frame from the system gears. I forget the exact name of them, and then allows the spring tension to pull the thing back to zero. Now, there is a zero stop lever in here. I'm going to have to review the document so I can make sure I pointed exactly what's what in here. But the zero stop makes sure that it doesn't go too far, and also make sure that it's in the right position for when you pivot it back forward, so that it can re-engage its adjoining gear. All right. So on inspection, this mechanism actually doesn't look in bad shape. This is a repair mission, so I might not actually have to disassemble this, but the individual steps to get it apart aren't that bad, just repeated 13 times, 12 columns plus the overflow. So I think I'll do it anyway, just as an exercise, because I have another one that I think I may need to actually do this on. It'd be nice to get some practice while I have the chance. All right, now we've come to the point where we're going to remove the accumulator wire. That is this wire right here. Now, to do this, you're first going to have to loosen this screw here and the same one on the other side. And I will advise these can be in kind of tight. And if you look carefully, you'll see that this one has suffered a little bit of damage. So you want to be very careful about how you do this to make sure that you don't inflict more. Just loosen them enough to make sure there's a little bit of play in the spacers here. As if this wire, you'll note, has these little things right here. Well, those belong to these springs. If I can get my camera in focus. So each of these is going to come loose as you take out the wire. Now, I also want to point out that in this first column, there's also a wire, there's also a spring here. This is part of the clearing mechanism. It is not going to come off as we do this. This will be dealt with later. So you want to take this wire here, and I'm going to use my handy dandy pin pusher. Move that a little to the left, and this is the direction you want to go. Now, over here, you'll notice that the wire does not protrude through the end of the frame. So I have to give it a little encouragement. So I need to take my fine pliers. Now, notice that these jaws are non-marring. Not that it really matters in this case, but so I have to take this and give it a little encouragement to get it over to the other side of the frame. You know, let's start over here. Push it just a little bit. Okay, there we go. Take this and gently push it outside the frame, if I can grab onto it. That will allow me to begin to pull it. It shouldn't require a whole lot of effort once you get it free. It should be able to move with your fingers. And you can see here, the first spring just dropped off. So do that again. So there's one. Now, I actually advise that you kind of keep your fingers on these things just so they don't go anywhere. See, each of them drops as I pull the pin out. And then you can pull this pin free. I will label this as the carry spring pin. Put it in my box of parts. Now we've come to the part where we need to remove this pin right here. If you'll notice carefully, there is a torsion spring which is connected to this. That has to be dealt with. And one end of that spring is this little curly bit right here. The other end is right there. Now, it's not a very complicated spring. Its job is to operate the stop here and to return it to its rest position. If I can grab it properly, you can see it moving. In order to disconnect the spring, you simply need to unhook it from the frame here. And it comes off pretty easily. You can now see that the spring is hanging loose. And there's the end of it that we just disconnected. Okay. Now you need to do that all the way across, and I highly advise taking pictures at this point so that you understand what is where, as it will help during reassembly. So after you get that started, I'm going to go ahead and take them all off, and then I'll start the camera again and take some pictures of my own. Then you need to withdraw the pin there. Now that pin might be a little difficult to get out, so I strongly advise having the proper size pin punch. At this point I should apologize for the way the camera is moving around. and some of the earlier bits. I have lights all around me and a tripod, and I'm trying to make sure that you can see everything I'm doing, and every single bit of it is getting in my way. So I'm going to have to work around that as we go on. Now you can see also that there's a little bit of rust on the backstop. That will have to be cleaned off when we get to that point. It's not bad, it's just surface rust, so just in terms of making it last a little longer, we'll take it off, polish it a bit, and then you can also see a bit of rust next to it. So all these parts will need to be cleaned up just to make sure that they last another 100 years. So I'll show you what happened when I start to withdraw that pin. Here's the pin. So if I can give you some more light so you can see it. As it comes out, the torsion spring is going to drop free. And the other parts are going to start to come loose. And you should be picking these things up as they drop so that you can keep them together. That one dropped right down here. Grab that, set it aside and put it in its bag. When I get a little bit more done for you here. Now this pin is particularly stiff, so I'm going to have to use a plier to actually pull it out. And more parts are dropping off. And pick them up and store them in column order. More things are starting to hang freely too. You can see that this bit here is no longer supported. Now let's bring pins out far enough I can take it off with my hand. It's down there. For the moment, let's just put that here so I can show you the rest of this. See, more things are able to fall free. So it's going to be kind of a bit of a mess if you don't keep things in the right position. So as you can see how everything's coming free. See, there's nothing left except the accumulator shaft and its wheel. I'm going to start packing this stuff up, and then I'll get back to you.